Reference and Research Services Librarian at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, and I am presenting on OER in the arts with my co-host Marty Miller, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Marty Miller, and I'm the Art and Design Librarian at Louisiana State University. And Peter has graciously presented with me several times, and he's a glutton for punishment because he keeps asking me to present. So, hello and welcome. So, just a little bit about LOESS. This is their statement about the project that we're going to speak about today. A little background on LOESS, that's a consortium, and it stands for Louisiana Library Network. It's a consortium of 48 public and private college and university member libraries. Started in 1992 when directors and libraries got together to create a cost-effective collaboration among the institutions for the procurement of library and technology and resources. They also provide educational opportunities and projects such as the project we're speaking about today. Next slide.
So, as Marty mentioned, we've done several presentations together before, and we always like to begin with a land acknowledgement. This is important because one of the aspects of OER is equity and inclusion, as well as accessibility. We want our materials to be usable and accessible to a variety of people and have an inclusive background for everyone. This presentation is a little shorter and we're a little pressed for time. So we've included links to our land acknowledgements. We can post that in the chat if you'd like to see it. And I'm going to go ahead and advance it next.
Okay, so the background on the open textbook project, and there's a link there for the information that LOESS put out. 25 cohorts, okay, faculty from public and private institutions, okay. The goal is to create open textbooks and basic course shells for dual enrollment courses. Librarians were the leaders and we were trained first. So starting in March of 2021, we began training. And then we went into a phase which was called Train the Trainers was the first phase. Second phase was us leading our cohort members and training them. Okay. And the topics that are covered range from business, history, English, arts, sciences. My particular cohort is exploring the arts. I keep wanting to call it expanding the arts. I don't know why. And our cohort activity began May 2021 and it will end in August of 2022.
Okay, so my particular cohort is dance appreciation, which if you have taken the time, I know that several of the presentations, including the one before us, was largely about creating OER, how to find OER. If you've ever taken the time to look up different subjects within OER, there's very little out there devoted to the arts. Both Marty and I had to kind of create our OER materials from scratch. There's very little, especially for dance appreciation. We couldn't really find anything. A little bit about my cohort. We included 3 faculty from across the state and 1 retired adjunct instructor school teacher. This was useful because this particular project is ultimately geared towards dual enrollment students. So it's helpful to have both the college professor perspective who are going to be teaching it, as well as someone who has been working one-on-one with high school students for many, many years. So that was an excellent fortuitous occurrence. Again, there was heavy content creation. What we largely did was take 2 of the courses that were already being taught by the 2 professors and use their content in the creation of a book. They had slides, they had presentations, they had a lot of ancillary materials. We just kind of took all of those materials, put them together in a textbook format, which was, we're still working on it. It's supposed to wrap up at the end of the month, but because those materials were already available, it gave us something to work with. We weren't completely writing everything from scratch.
So my course, Exploring the Arts, I have 4 faculty from across the state and plus 1 GA that came in a little bit later. This course was challenging because it covered the big 4: art, theater, music, and dance. And there was literally no OER textbook out there that we could use to adapt. Most of the content creation is from the cohorts, except for 1, which was music. So down here, content sources, the existing course content, art history and theater, that was what we used for the textbook. The music, a faculty member was lucky about halfway through this process. She did find a music textbook that would work for our purposes. We could adapt and edit. Collaboration with the dance cohort is what we're going to use for that part of our content. And then the theater faculty member has constructed some of her own ancillary. She was able to find a activity, H5P activity that would work for her course, but the rest of those are still works in progress. Okay.
Okay, so what worked well? What worked really well for both Marty and I was the use of Basecamp. I don't know how familiar any of you are with Basecamp, but this is a little image from, I believe, Marty's Basecamp. Mine looks pretty much the same. It's a sort of a website that allows you to interact. You can post documents, you can communicate with one another. You can there's a calendar that everyone shares. There's a lot of tools that do this, but both Marty and I were already familiar with Basecamp, and it did work well for this project. Moodle was another item that worked well. As I mentioned, 2 of my instructors were already teaching dance appreciation with Moodle. So all we had to do was use some of the content that was within their Moodle and transfer it into our OER content. So that was very, very easy to work with. Working with other cohort leaders, by being involved with Lewis, we were very much not alone. I personally found it helpful hearing from not just Marty, which she was great to work with, but also the dance, the music cohort, and the biology cohort, and the history cohort. Just hearing some of the problems, some of the similarities, some of the issues that they were coming up with, and some of the solutions that they had was very, very useful. It was not uncommon for them in our cohort meetings to pull up a spreadsheet or a checklist, or something that they had created specifically for their cohort to kind of work through this process. And every time someone did that, someone within the cohort said, hey, can you post that? I'd like to adapt that for my course. I know that I personally adapted several checklists to kind of help work through the process. So it was great working with the other cohort leaders. I'm not sure I could have completed this without the team behind us. The bi-monthly cohort meetings worked very well as well. As part of the grant, we were required to complete, I think, 18 or 19 meetings as part of the phase 2 project, wherein we had to meet with both the cohort as a whole, with the other librarians, and with the individual cohorts. In my case, the dance instructors. In Marty's case, the art instructors. That was useful because it gave us an opportunity to communicate what we're experiencing, what was working back and forth. I personally found it helpful because my cohort liked using them as working meetings. I initially designed our instruction within the dance OER creation to be kind of, they would meet with me and then they would go work on their own. But I quickly realized that wasn't going to work. We had to use the meetings to go over the content that they were writing, to proofread what they were writing. to answer questions that they were experiencing. So the monthly meetings were very helpful. In addition, there were all kinds of learning opportunities, acquisition of new skills, learning how to upload images, learning about Creative Commons licensing, discovering, I know that my faculty in particular, discovering that fair use does not apply in all cases for classroom instruction. So learning about Creative Commons, learning about licensing, learning about new ideas, putting it all together was something that was very useful. We have a number of links here that were helpful in helping us put together some of the content. I didn't use Unsplash too much, so I'll let Marty comment on Unsplash, but this is what Unsplash website looks like here.
It's pretty much a treasure trove of open licensed images, including artwork, which is particularly useful in my case. Also, Creative Commons is very useful, although I understand sometimes you have to be a little bit careful with them. Sometimes the images are still copyrighted, even though they're being, of course, their pictures being taken by another person. So you do have to be a little bit cautious with them. But Unsplash in general was very, very useful in that respect.
We both used H5P. I saw some of the other groups talk about H5P in their OER creation. I'm personally a huge fan of H5P. I was a little intimidated to use it at first. But it's useful in that you can create interactive content within, you can use it in Moodle, of course, but you can also put it directly in the textbook. The dance group found it particularly helpful because you could post a video and then a question beneath that video about the dance technique that was taking place, or the way the body moved, or the syncopation of the music in correlation to the dancers. So H5P is definitely something, if you haven't used it, to try. And the other tool that's listed that I found incredibly useful was 10i. As I said, a lot of my faculty were unfamiliar with copyright protection. They thought everything was for fair use. So initially they were using images that they just wanted to use. They've always used it. They didn't see a problem using it. But those images were copyrighted. So it was very helpful for me to check all the images that they were posting in order to make sure that they were in fact Creative Commons and freely available, and that we weren't intruding on someone else's work.
So challenges, there are always challenges when you get a group of people together. Some of these were institutional, had to do with paperwork and issues with the grant money distribution. Pretty much got that handled through the help of both Lewis and some very, very kind people at my institution. Other things, by subject silos, I mean the faculty would get wrapped up in their own subject area and there wouldn't be a lot of back and forth collaboration and feedback. The monthly meetings helped a little bit with that. Technological challenges. I know one faculty member's site had a lot of Wi-Fi issues at one point, and she had a difficult time getting logged on. Outside events, of course, always happen, whether it be personal or, you know, acts of God, if you will. But those came up, and with that, some communication issues. Sometimes I would find out about the issue after a period of silence or after a meeting had been held, and then I'd find out after the fact why folks weren't there. Some of those could have been helped with better communication. Some could not. Participation problems, see all of the above. Some couldn't be helped. Others had to work around without getting too specific or calling anyone out. Yeah, they were issues with people kind of not attending for a while, but still keeping in communication with email. Cohort and librarian, creating and editing a large part of the content. Fortunately, I didn't have to do a lot of creating after all, but a good share of the editing has fallen upon me. Other things that have happened, the GA that I mentioned, who was brought in by one of the cohort members well after we'd been trained, trying to get them up to what we were doing and what was expected of them was an extra challenge I hadn't expected. It's worked out, but it was something that probably should have been addressed or should have been brought up sooner with regard to that particular cohort member's time allotment to work on this project. Okay. Next.
Okay, so there were different solutions for the various challenges that we met. Some of them were varied, as Marty said. Anytime you deal with people, you're dealing with multiple personalities, multiple ideas, different backgrounds. So the challenges are going to have individual solutions that differ depending on what was going on. One of the things that worked was assigning specific tasks. Working with individual faculty, you would have to kind of say to them, okay, we need this specific item by 2 weeks from today. Some of the faculty referred to it as receiving homework, their words, not ours. But by giving them the homework, giving them the specific tasks, they had something that they could work on, something that they could focus on, and they weren't sort of flailing out there by themselves. Something that worked well for my particular cohort was anonymous reporting of issues. Early on, my faculty didn't really know each other. They weren't comfortable criticizing each other. So as they were writing, they weren't comfortable with the content that was included. They felt that it was not necessarily inclusive, but they weren't necessarily comfortable saying that directly to the faculty member themselves. So by reporting that to me and then bringing that forward to the group as a whole, that alleviated some of those issues. Individual meetings, we offered open meetings, office hours. If they were having trouble, they could drop in. They didn't have to stay for the entire 50 minutes or hour or whatever. Kind of work through their project, work through their issue, find out what was going on. That worked fairly well. In some extreme cases, we had to get Lewis involved in some of the issues. I know that I had to report to Lewis a couple of issues that were taking place, one which included plagiarism only last week. So some issues did come up that we had to get Lewis involved and kind of get those issues cleared up. Sharing press books, Rebus training recordings, that worked well, particularly with everybody's schedule. Not everybody can make a meeting. So by recording those meetings, they could be watched later, and then faculty or whomever can respond to those issues later. And then taking on the editing tasks to free up content creation time. I know that Marty did this, I did it as well. The faculty, when you're dealing with creating an OER, creating an item, they can somewhat feel overwhelmed. So by taking on the editing, cleaning up paragraphs, making them link together, using 10i to check the images that they're using, that kind of frees them up to actually make the content they want to include. What's next for me? So as the project enters phase 3, our faculty are supposed to begin teaching with the materials. UL does not currently offer dance appreciation either in the dual enrollment format or as an undergraduate class. So I've been meeting with the dean at the College of Arts. We've already had 2 meetings. We're looking at trying to create that class. If you've ever tried to create a class at a college or university, it's a very lengthy process. It has to go through the curriculum committee. It has to go through the gen ed committee. You have to talk with all kinds of people. So that process is kind of arduous and kind of tedious, but we have begun doing that. Our dual enrollment high school teacher has taught at UL in the past as an adjunct. So she is fully available and in agreement to teach this class. So that has been helpful. Something else that I'm going to be working on is expanding the use of OER. Faculty here at the University of Louisiana have been a little bit hesitant to embrace OER. So by creating this particularly for the arts, working with the faculty, it kind of gets the interest out there, gets people thinking about it. What's going on here with the dance class and using an OER course? Maybe I can find out more about that. So it's an opportunity for me to work with the distance education librarian, work with other faculty on campus to kind of increase OER and get more people to adopt OER.
Okay, so what's next for me? What I am working on is an OER for visual literacy practice. This is not conceived as a textbook, but as a series of guided activities with decreasing prompts. Reasons for this, it's based on my research that students do have visual literacy skills, but are so reliant on prompts that when they're faced with no prompts or few prompts, they don't know what to do. Also, I want it to be open access because there are enough institutionally proprietary visual literacy tools out there already. My idea is CC BY license, just give me credit for the original and do what you will with it. I'm also working on an ACRL book chapter about the planning process. It's currently undergoing edits. I'm looking into potentially serving as an embedded librarian in the course and working with other liaisons on future OER. One of those is a landscape architecture course or tool with the curator of rare books here at the library.
So that we're just about out of time. So we're open to questions. If anybody has any questions for us about the project or how we put it together, we're happy to answer those.
Yeah, we have about 4 minutes until noon. So either raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can ask your question or place them in the chat.
My goodness, did we present that well that there are no questions?
That or everyone's just thinking of lunch right now.
Oh.
It was a really great presentation though, Marty and Peter. And as Jennifer said, much needed resources in this area. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree on that.
Yeah, it's much neglected. I know that when I began this project, I was kind of hoping to modify something. I was really disappointed to discover there was nothing out there to modify, that we were going to have to work from scratch.
Same. I like your comment, Jennifer. I was really disappointed in the quality of some of the art in particular. I mean, they're great for high school and primary and secondary, but college level, it's just not out there.
No, and same with like music and a lot of these more like art-based liberal art programs. I know at our program we've had quite a few that had hoped to adapt and only to find that you can't. Oh, we do have a question. Where can we find your amazing resource? Apologies if I missed this. Just on the Lewis site?
Yeah, if you're talking about the open enrollment textbooks, those haven't been released yet. If you're talking about mine, it is still being constructed. So eventually Lewis has said they will host my tool. I'm calling it a tool. So stay tuned. I think I put the Lewis link somewhere in the chat. That would be a place to check. I'm looking at about a year right now to get that out. I'm just wrapping up this very intense project. So once that's done, I can start working on mine in earnest.
As far as the dance OER textbook, And I think that art appreciation textbook, Lewis is going to publish those August 12th. And they have to go through a pilot teaching phase. So I don't know if they'll be available immediately or after the pilot teaching is finished. But that's definitely something to look for. If you check the Lewis Library's website, it's been posted. As soon as it's published, it should be there.
Thanks, Peter. I forgot that date.
Nah, it's on my mind.
I don't know how I forgot it, but
August 12th. I put it in the chat for everyone.